They lost their daughter. Now they've lost their house. The family of Renisha McBride is now homeless after they say their landlord didn't pay his bills. Fox News' Andrea Isom live now in Detroit with more on the sad story. Andrea?
You know, this family has already been through so much, and now this. They tell us they paid their rent. They took care of this property. They did everything right, but somebody did them wrong.
The whole life has been ripped from me.
On November 2nd, her daughter, 19-year-old Renisha McBride, was gunned down in cold blood on a porch in Dearborn Heights. This tragedy shook Metro Detroit and this entire nation, but no one hurts more than her mom.
I don't feel I have nothing to live for without her.
When your heart seems to break a little more every day, sometimes the only thing that brings you any sort of comfort is home. But now, Monica McBride no longer has a permanent place to lay her head.
I stay from place to place, but our main source is a hotel.
Well, a motel. That's where Monica mourns and remembers her Renisha, because she says the management company at the property she rented kicked her out of this house here on Whitcomb. How come?
They're scamming our people and moving them into foreclosed houses and getting the rent.
Monica tells Fox 2, once she found out the house was in foreclosure, she confronted the said owner.
He explained to me that they had a partial payment that they paid where they wouldn't go under to lose the home in foreclosure, so I kept paying.
Until an official foreclosure letter showed up. So she stopped shelling out the cash. But then came the chaos.
They came here and set their stuff out.
All of their belongings were thrown in this dumpster.
You could have gave us time to get our stuff together and to move. You just threw us out like we were dogs in the middle of the cold.
The owner of the house, he was next door to him. He was watching everything, and then he backed 2 houses back. But when they left, he came right here, looked on the side of the house, and then he entered the door. I said, you know what? You don't have no conscience. You didn't even give him a chance to grieve.
Right.
Do you know what you're doing?
My thing is, you don't even own the home.
Yes.
And you see what my mama is going through.
When you look at people that know that this family just lost a loved one, and you still go after greed and after money in a crooked way, in a form or fashion, to take advantage of this family.
Monica has not been the same since her daughter died. She cannot work. She cannot sleep. She's devastated, depressed, on medication to cope, in counseling, therapy. And on top of that, now she has nothing.
Then had to hawk and pawn everything that she's had in order to live.
It used to be a village that would help you. Now it's a village that will harm you.
They knowing that the houses is for foreclosure, but they're renting these houses to our people and taking that money. And then when they stop paying the rent, once they done found out it's in foreclosure, they come and they set them out, and I don't know how they're getting away with it.
What if it was your family? What would you have done?
Monica is so hurt, so upset that she could not even get out of the car and walk up to this place. Neighbors tell us that people are coming through and dumpster diving, taking the McBride's belongings. They're staying in a motel right now. That money is running out. They don't know what they will do next. But they are hoping that that management company steps up and does the right thing and makes this right. Now, we did reach out to that management company. It was after hours, so in all fairness, we are not mentioning their name until we get a return phone call and find out what they have to say about this big mess. Reporting live on the West Side tonight, I'm Andrea Isom on The Edge.
Well, Andrea, that is no way to treat a grieving family. I can't wait to hear what the management company has to say.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to be on the phone bright and early in the morning.
I know you will. Andrea, thank you.
Renisha McBride. Context of white supremacy. I guess before we even move any further, for listeners, I know we do have a number of listeners in the Michigan area, as we have for most of our 17-year broadcast history. I am aware of my Michigan geography. Renisha McBride, the Dearborn Heights region, that is a little less than 20 miles from Detroit. So that's not exactly Detroit, but it is certainly close enough for our purposes. Renisha McBride. And just to make sure I get on the record, we are broadcasting 1 hour early today. That would be Monday, March 16, 2026. So I have been told. Our normal broadcast time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're just 1 hour early today. We will be back to our regular broadcast time for the remainder of the week. This was just one time, or I can't say one time, but this was just an anomaly for the day. Normal time for the cows, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's it. Even though Rayshawn McBride is not, I guess, technically a resident in the Detroit area proper, many aspects of what were discussed there, the white violence against black people and foreclosures and black people not being treated like human beings with just basic housing, many of those basic concerns will be discussed in our broadcast today, and it's all the state of Michigan, so very appropriate through and through. I told folks, or I've said for some time now, our recent history of the cows, I have encouraged non-white people, victims of white supremacy, read one nonfiction book published the current calendar year, at least one, just that way we can start to recognize how many books are published about racism on a regular basis. There have already been a bunch of them this year, and we've barely gotten to March. One thing I will do, we get to the end of the calendar year like we just did, I will look back and say, well, I'm sure I missed some good ones. There have to be, some books that came out about racism I didn't see, got some good information, that sort of thing. So I always try to go back and look, and I will always find a ton because I'll be lazy or just get, busy, all sorts of things, and just won't have time to kind of keep an eye out for new publications dealing with the problem. One of them snuck in right at the deadline, December 2025. See, at least my rough memory, there were a number of books that came out right at the end of the year. We read Shar Adams' Black-Owned, The Revolutionary Life of the Black Bookstore. Excellent one. Problems at the end, but excellent material nonetheless, published right at the close of the calendar. But this here, another one. The title, Demolishing Detroit, How Structural Racism Endures. That one I saw because it had the racism component in the subtitle. And then certainly we have lots of listeners in the Michigan area, even some of them looking for material like this, dealing with racism in the Midwest region, Michigan specifically. The author of this text that we're looking forward to chatting it up about today, an assistant professor of anthropology at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He is an anthropologist of technology, interested in the intersections of racism, space, and justice, and his research uses ethnographic and archival methods to investigate political and ecologies of racial capital, especially white power and anti-blackness. I would say maybe all of those bases are touched in the book we will discuss today, Demolishing Detroit, How Structural Racism Endures. Joining us live to chat it up about the brand new text and racism in the Detroit area, our guest, Dr. Nicholas Caverly. Dr. Caverly, are you with us, sir?
I am with you, Gus. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Crystal, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Monday evening, I guess St. Patrick's Day Eve. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Is it Caverly? Caverly?
Yes, sir. It is Caverly.
Caverly. I had it right the first time. Awesome. For listeners, I'm sure we have some folks who don't get to hang out in the New England area or Michigan. This might be their first time hearing about your work. Anything you would like to tell us briefly about the work that you do as an anthropologist?
As you said, I'm an anthropologist. That means a lot of the work that I do involves talking to people and learning about how they live in the world. So that ethnographic method that you spoke about, I spent about 10 years in Detroit talking to folks who experienced vacant building demolitions, either as people who live next door to them or people who worked on them in various ways. And so the goal of the work that I do is to talk to ordinary people about their lives and basically approach them as experts in their own experiences, which of course they are. So that's maybe the most important thing to know about people who are anthropologists is that that's what we do. We talk to ordinary folks and learn about the world from their perspectives.
Fascinating, fascinating. We'll dig into some of the folks that you chatted up with in Demolishing Detroit. I guess one, for folks who've not seen you, you are classified as white. Is that true?
That is correct.
Right on. And before we get to the book specifically, I guess to put a project like this together entitled Demolishing Detroit, How Structural Racism Endures, it would be accurate to say that you, Dr. Caverly, you are informed about what racism is, how it works. That would be a true statement?
That is a true statement, I hope.
Right on, right on. We hope so, too. Our program, and you have already said it so many times because it's in the title, which I love, the term racism and the term white supremacy, which is liberally used in this book. I use those terms as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
I mean, such a system, we have so much evidence that such a system exists, and I think that's a really, really good working definition for us to start with. Yeah.
Right on, succinct. Let's see. You are joining us, Professor, we've already stated, at University of Massachusetts Amherst. That is not Michigan. Did you grow up in the Detroit area or have any connection to that region?
I did. I grew up in the Detroit area. I grew up in what are the western suburbs. So basically midway between Detroit and Ann Arbor. About 25 miles from Detroit.
Oh, okay. Okay. Not too far away. Not too far away.
Yeah.
And that's Go Pistons. Go Pistons. Ann Arbor.
Go Pistons.
Okay. Yeah. That's my knowledge from James Lowen. Did you grow up in a so-called sundown town, racially restricted region?
You know, I think that I grew up in a place that was never formally restricted. However, you know, I think that as we know, you don't need formal restrictions to have restrictions. Is that square with your understanding?
Oh, hey, many times, I think Mr. Lowen said, many times they have these towns where they don't exactly have the sign that says no niggers, but it's still no niggers. Well, I guess, did you grow up, do you remember there being very many black children or black people, period, non-white people, period, in the area where you grew up in Michigan?
I mean, in the area where I grew up, there were families of color, like on my block, and in the school, there were folks, black kids in the schools that I went to, but there were not very many of them, right? This would have been in the early 90s. And so when I say, this was in a place that had formal restrictions, but I think all of the ways that restrictions operate in a kind of soft way and a not necessarily written down way, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, I can see how those things were at work. But that I can't say that was something that I noticed as a child.
I see. That's so interesting. Michigan, 1990s, the first thing that popped in my brain computer was not bad bad boys basketball and Dennis Rodman with a bad bot. Was none of that. The first thing that popped in my brain computer was Tim McVeigh and the Nichols brothers. Oh my goodness, the Michigan militia. That's what popped in my brain, and other things as well. But man, Michigan's all that nonsense about the South, like Michigan's history, especially with the militia, and some of that on display close to January 6th and all the rest of it. But neither here nor there. McVeigh, one of our recurrent characters here at the Context of White Supremacy for background. So growing up in that area, some of your connection to go back and do this here project. What was your, Dr. Caverly, what was your ultimate objective in writing Demolishing Detroit?
I mean, my goal in writing this book was to understand to provide a way for people to sit with the causes and the process of building demolitions, because I think with that process we see something that is at work across the United States, which is how racist distributions of benefits and harms, so who can live where, who can own what, who has clean air, who has contaminated soil, these are things that are embedded in the everyday places that we live and work. And so that was something that in talking to folks in Detroit, they helped make clear to me. And so that was a story that I thought was worth telling.
I see. And I guess so you just explained that portion. Were you trying to solve a problem specifically in telling this book about these demolitions and such?
No, I don't think I can say I was trying to solve a problem. I think that what I was trying to do, and I can't say that I fully succeeded, but I think what I was trying to do was to contribute to the ways that folks think about racism, and to offer us a view of how complicity in racism is, there are people, who they very, Timothy McVeigh is now on my mind, right? Like Timothy McVeigh, domestic terrorist, very clearly, said racist things, right? We could point to him and be like, this is a racist. But there are a lot of, there are folks out there who would say, well, I'm not out there saying racist things, so I'm not necessarily complicit in a system of white supremacy. And what I wanted to do is what I think demolitions help us do is to broaden our understanding of complicity in racism. And they help us see how, systems that have been in motion for quite a long time now continue to persist, and how anti-black and white supremacist outcomes from things, right? Questions of, the everyday conditions under which people live our lives, like the racist disparities that we see in those things, those are things that we need to think about, independent. Well, we can think about the folks like Timothy McVeigh, but we also have to think about the rest of us and to understand what it's going to take to change those systems to make them work a little bit differently. So I don't think I was setting out to solve a problem, but I was setting out to make an argument about how we have to think a little bit more expansively about what complicity in racism looks like, if we want to address it.
Much obliged for the detailed response. I guess let me make sure I heard what you said correctly. Due to my foolish responses, you have Timothy McVeigh on the brain now, unfortunately, and that, yes, would be an accurate representation. White supremacist, true, but we should think beyond that in terms of ways that people classified as white participate in or complicit in the system of white supremacy, which your book focusing locally on Detroit specifically. Am I kind of paraphrasing accurately what you said?
That is a very great paraphrase. Thank you for it.
Right on. Context of White Supremacy, Dr. Nicholas Caverly. with regards to the answer that you just gave in terms of helping your readers kind of get a better, broader, more accurate understanding of racism and how it works in Detroit specifically, who did you envision reading Demolishing Detroit? Like, was this a book as an anthropologist? Was this something for your students? Was this something for people in Detroit, like the people that you talked to? Was this any old person? Who did you have in mind, like, is going to be sitting down to read this book?
I mean, I will say I wrote this book over the past, 5 or 6 years, at a time when, I teach a lot of, really wonderful, bright, young students who ask me questions like, is racism inevitable? And so I can't say, if they read the book, I really hope, that would be great. And but I think I definitely had their questions in my mind while writing it, thinking about, because students in classes ask really insightful questions about, you were learning about how systems of dispossession and systems of racist privilege were, came into being, how they've endured through time. Are they always going to be that way? And so I wanted to give them, I had that question in mind, and something I hope that readers might take away from the book is definitively no, these systems do not have to look the ways that they do. These systems can be changed, and doing so is going to take a whole lot of work.
For sure. I guess you mentioned your University of Massachusetts students. What are the demographics of the folks who come to learn anthropology from you, your students, in terms of white, non-white?
Yeah, so the students who, most of the students who I teach are, I think, reflective of our student body. So we are a predominantly white university. Most of our students are, I think about 70% of our students are kids from Eastern Massachusetts. I can't say they reflect the state, but for the most part, the students who are in my class are white kids from New England.
About what I would expect. I think Mr. Lowen, in his book, I think he said basically all of New England is kind of one gigantic sundown town, racially restricted region, basically. Give or take.
Yes, and it has I think New England, I moved here in 2020, and it was an odd. I remember moving here and thinking, like, this place is a little bit weird, because on the one hand, right, it likes to tout that it's this seemingly politically progressive place, and as you just noted, right, like the New England has an incredibly racist history and present.
Wow. I didn't. I've only been to Massachusetts, and that was some time ago, so I haven't really spent a lot of time up there. I'm black male. But I did not know that they have this tradition of progressive and, liberal. Like,
it's a story that we, all stories are stories you tell yourself. But then, Boston is often noted to be the most racist city in the United States.
That I've heard. The progressive, I haven't heard. The Boston racist city. Oh yeah, Charles Stewart and Bill Russell and oh yeah. I've heard that a bunch of times. Let's see. Got the demographics of the folks at the class. So for folks kind of who maybe they haven't read, and you've already kind of explained like your work methodology as an anthropologist in putting this book together, lots of going and talking to the people and going, being in Detroit for years. So getting to talk like repeatedly, getting to go and hang out with these people and go to their houses and such. And you talk to a lot of black people, Rayshawn and Ken and Daisy. It's just tons of black people all throughout the text. How did you, a white professor in New England, what was your spiel to meeting these black folks to say, hey, let me hang out with you, give me your number so I can come and hang out in your living room for the next 6 months or 6 years, however long that I'm hanging out here. What was that spiel like?
Well, at the time when I was doing the research for this book, I wasn't a professor at the University of Massachusetts. For the most part, I was a student at the University of Michigan. I earned my PhD from the University of Michigan in 2020, which was right before I got this job here at the University of Massachusetts. And so I think that a lot of it, and I write a little bit about this, a lot of my ability to do this project in the way that I did was helped out by the fact that I was a student. And I think that gave me some unstructured time to be able to, this is a book about demolition. And so I would, demolitions were happening. There was this massive influx of funding for empty building demolitions in Detroit, beginning around 2013. And so I would sit and I would watch demolitions, and often that meant that there were also folks out in their neighborhoods watching demolitions, and I would talk to them and I would say, hey, I'm a student and working on a research project about demolition. Do you mind if I watch with you? And sometimes people would say no, but often people said yes. And if they said no, I left and I went somewhere else. But these were conversations, and often, at first again, I was a white kid in my 20s at the time. And, that was a type, most of the people I talked to were like, oh yeah, we know exactly who you are, right? Like, you're not a social worker and you're not a cop. So we're pretty sure you're a researcher. And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I am. And so this is this is a book that builds, in ways that I hope it builds. It went through those conversations with folks. And so we would talk through things, and I would say, hey, they knew that this was a thing that could become a book someday. And I would ask, hey, is it okay if I use what we talk about, or is there stuff in this that you don't want me to use? And so that's the kind of the process that I went through. And so I benefited from folks' hospitality. And, there are people who I talk to for an afternoon, or I talk to for 10 minutes, and then, we never touched base again. And then there were people who kept asking me to come back, and they were like, hey, can you come back and talk again? Can we talk again? And so those are a bit deeper relationships that I had the benefit of building.
Fascinating. With any of the Black Detroiters that you spoke with, I guess I'll pause one, I do think that is important with regards to, we just had a guest on the program, contest white identity, whether or not white identity at its core is really about power. And I said, what else is it about if it's not about power? He said, oh, bah, humbug, Gus T, you're talking foolishness. And I'm just repeating what I just heard. He said, so when Dr. Caverly, well, at the time he wasn't Dr. Lee, so student Caverly, he would go and talk to these Detroiters, and he'd say, I'm doing my research and blah, 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 and they would look at him and say, well, you're not a social worker, you're not a cop. That is power, like all capital letters. And they started with the social worker. Ugh, we were just talking about that. They started with the, I hope you're not here to take our children. Or, I hope you're not here to take us to jail. Or kill us. Or both. Power. Nobody thought he was a homeless person or some opioid addict. Position of power. Which he is, because it's doctor now. So, they were right. So, you give them your, speech about what you're doing, book, all that. Some of these people you just talked to once, some of them it's repeat. Did any of the black people, did they say, wait a minute, are you white? Yes. Oh, okay. No, I don't want to talk to no white people. I've had a really bad time of it here in Detroit, and white people have done me wrong. I'm suspicious of white people, and I don't want to be a part of your book project. Get out of here. Did you get that from any of the black people?
Yeah, I got that from a couple folks.
Oh, so that wasn't like a common response.
It was not a common response. I think I can't say why it wasn't a common response, but I can absolutely say, what you were saying, that this is about power. I guess I'm confused by the guest on your show who would have said that whiteness is not about power, and that was something that I guess I wanted to be what I was quite open with folks about, was that I didn't see, my job wasn't to kind of talk about what their exact experiences of the world were, but to actually figure out with them how the world was working and to understand how racism was working and had continued to work in Detroit. And I think that's something that a lot of folks in Detroit, especially Black Detroiters, are invested in making sure that there's enough light shown on that. And so I really appreciate the time that folks gave me in order to help me put this book together.
Understood. Just for the record, the guest greatly confused me as well. What in the world? What? Anyway, that was moving forward, spinning my head. You talked about I mentioned some of the different black people, and which I guess she was one of the ones who did not say I'm suspicious of white people. And I guess she was one of the ones that you actually had a repeat relationship with, where I guess how often were you able to hang out with Daisy?
Oh, I've seen Daisy a lot over the years. I could not put a number on it for you, but Daisy is someone who I saw, and all the folks who are in this book, so they're called by names that aren't their actual names, but they're names that we came to together. So they know who they are. But they are, these are not their actual names. But the person who's called Daisy in the book, I've seen, I got to know Daisy pretty well, I think.
Wow. I thought lots of great insight in this portion of the book where she's having repair issues. She's a homeowner, and one of the people who does not want her property destroyed, but does want some of the other properties taken down that could impact her own property value and safety and all that good stuff. And it's just trying to get repairs, and lots of black people in this position just trying to get repairs for their property, not loans per se, just repairs, stay off the blight list, and maybe you can get some of the other structures that might be messing up our neighborhood. If you can get some of those down, things would be looking great. She's one of those, and eventually does get her after lots of challenge, we'll say, and racism directly, indirectly. She is able to get some repairs to her property through the, I guess, years of your research. I'm fast forwarding a little bit because this was great. Like, you have to get the book to read the portion about Daisy, and he has lots of different black people that he can, and some of these I am going to get to. But lots of different black people, and they have lots of different components of how all of this is put together. But wow, the portion where you start talking about in terms of manhood, and I guess even thinking of the component in terms of how white people are complicit in the practice of racism, white supremacy. This is, make sure I can give out the exact page number here. This is on page 118. Woo, man, oh man. So in this book kind of hits all areas of people activity, labor and housing, politics, economics, kind of everything pops up in the text here. This is chapter 4 of the book, Excavators, the folks who come in and got to do the knocking and scrapping and all of that stuff. You write, for the mostly black men who earn their livelihoods performing odd jobs as general labor. The end of demolition employment meant transitioning into low-waged service jobs or harvesting components from empty buildings for sale to architectural savage warehouses. Meanwhile, the mostly white men employed as unionized excavator operators could easily transition to work in other unionized operating sectors, including construction and waste management. Even for black Detroiters who owned demolition firms, their claims on the means of production were never as secure as those of more established firms owned by white suburbanites. Overall, building removal work sites ensured the security of white men, even when people wanted otherwise. In this regard, demolition crews that physically leveled the remains of forced mass production marked not a departure from the inequities of industrial or racial capitalism, but their endurance. And I thought this was so important to make that distinction very early. Not that I expected black males to be on par with white men, but it's so we don't even live in the same zip code, much less tax bracket. Like, it is bifurcated in about even if we hang out at the same job site, and you have some of that, even then, we do not live on the same planet. Zip code, area code, practically nothing. I thought that was so important, that distinction between white manhood, black maleness, masculinity in Detroit. Can you elaborate, Dr. Caverly?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for raising that, because, something that I thought was, one of the arguments that was made for demolition. So, there's about, there's several hundreds of millions of dollars in public funds that have been devoted to empty building demolitions in Detroit over the past, decade or so. And, was that tearing down buildings would create employment opportunities, especially for Detroiters, especially for black men in Detroit. And I found it really, frustrating, but also, unsurprising that those opportunities were not the kind, they were not the highest waged opportunities on the site. And that is something, this is not a new feature of the American economy. It's not a new feature of the global economy, as you were saying. And so I was, something that I think demolition provides a really helpful vantage point on is how, even through a process that looks like it's right, you can take a factory that has been decommissioned, that's being offshored, and it looks like, the vision of mass production has just been entirely removed when you demolish it. The process of actually removing that building is predicated on the same kind of racist and racializing labor regime as mass production itself, or something that looks very similar to it. And so demolition, I think, provides a really helpful perspective on something that isn't just limited to Detroit. It's something where we invest a lot of public resources into something, allegedly fixing structural inequity, but actually what we do is we maintain it. We don't actually address the underlying problems. And so that was something that really stood out to me from the conversations with the people who were in this chapter.
And at least it seemed to me, and particularly the gendered nature of labor, because it even stood out to me, I think, in the way that the book is structured. You can correct me if my memory is bad here, but the way the book is structured, So we had already met like Joel and some of these other folks. And I think we met Ken as well, for people listening in who haven't read the book. So Joel, one of these, I guess they call unskilled laborers in Detroit, kind of lowest rung, low paid, probably dangerous, toxic maybe even. And so Ken, now he did, past tense kind of says it all here, own his own company. Again, past tense kind of says it all here. But then we get Maureen. Now, she does have kind of a dangerous job. Make sure I'm, giving the full preface. She does have kind of a dangerous job. Anything where you got to go and mess around with asbestos, it's not like she's sitting someplace cushy and, just, hey, I play on the phone all day long and go take 15-hour lunch breaks and all that stuff. Or even if she did, still, she's working with asbestos. So it's not like she has a dangerous job. That said, hey, we're told in the book she has lung capacity like a white woman and has spent her entire life living in the suburbs. Wow, that is a little bit different from Ken, who is getting his name scraped off of his equipment. Wow, there seems to be a gendered like, for if you are a black male in Detroit, the gendered nature of racism is going to come through very strong with regards to, are you going to be able to get a job? What type of job are you going to have? Oh, you're going to have to go pick asbestos. That's going to be your job. Or you go get scrap bricks. That'll be your job. Did I miss something? Did I misread things?
I mean, I do not. You did not misread things. I will say, I'm not the work that I do is not statistical. So I cannot. I'm not saying that there is some kind of statistical inevitability to if you are, of gender here. However, what I did see, right, like when we look at heavy machine operation, which is a real gendered form, right? There are women who work in heavy machine operation, but for the most part, the folks who work in it are men, and that is a result of who do we think is, when I say we, right, like the kind of at the level of our society, who do we think is a good fit? Again, scare quotes around good fit, for heavy machine operation. And if that's a masculine kind of profession, well, we're gonna encourage men to do it. And then there's also a racialized component to that too, in which it's like, well, who has the better job security, who has the better pay, and even for somebody like Ken, right? Ken is a black man who owned a demo, as you said, yes, past tense, a demolition firm, and was really trying to, build something that would employ, as he would say, folks like him, right? Black Detroiters, especially black men who live in Detroit, at a living wage. And that was something that, he couldn't hold on to. That the structural conditions meant that when there was a long period without demolitions, without revenue coming in, he lost the company, or he had to sell the company. And so when we look at that, it's an interesting connection to somebody like Maureen, right? Somebody who has a kind of what is sometimes seen as a professional job as an asbestos inspector. And that is again, a gendered form of labor that, at the level of our society, we see, kind of certain people encouraged to do certain kinds of work. And that's something that certainly would be at work or at play, for folks like Maureen and Ken and Joel.
Black male privilege, they say. Woo, I did not find too much of that in this here book. As he said, not statistical work, but I'm just making patterns. We do look for patterns. There are some patterns here about the way this here, black male privilege. Woo, in fact, if they could get a teaspoon of that would be great. Maybe some of these folks Ken could have kept his company, or Joel wouldn't have to collect bricks to keep, winter heat on. Let's see. The book, again, Demolishing Detroit, just came out the end of 2025. Before I even moved from Ken, who lost his company where he was explicitly, proudly really, trying to hire Detroiters. And he didn't, unless I misread, he didn't just say, I'm some old reverse racist and I just hire black people. He said, I hire Detroiters. I want to hire people because I just said we don't live on the same planet, the white man and the rest of us. I want to hire people who have a Detroit zip code, live right here. Yes, black males too, but it didn't seem like if you're a black dude or if you're not a black dude, you can't get a job. Did Ken hire non-black people?
Yes.
Did he hire white people?
I believe he did, but I cannot remember that off the top of my head. I think, as you said, Ken is not a reverse racist, and I think that something that came up was that there was a tension between firms who would accuse Detroit-based firms of being reverse, of suburban firm, people who work for suburban firms, typically white men, would accuse Detroit-based firms of being reverse racist, and so that's a real pernicious, false claim, lie that was sometimes leveled at firms like Ken's.
I appreciate that portion, and now it would seem they were refined enough, the white people who were making these gripes and complaints, it would be couched in language of, oh, they don't support the union. They're driving down wages and such for people who do this work. And you pointed out, nope, they hire and pay scale wages and all the rest of it. It's just they want to actually, we're open to hire people who are not union workers, who might be black dudes who live in Detroit. Yes, even you can come and get a good job and do well while the season is in. And just the fact that you have people who don't even live in Detroit proper, live out in like Auburn Hills type area, and they're upset. Guys, and you're that right there. White people are not ignorant about racism, and in fact, when Dr. Caverly, when he said it would take a lot, it doesn't have to be this way. Things could be changed, but it's going to take a lot. That response right there, and this was just a social media post that was mysteriously deleted, but that right there lets me know, oh man, white people are not ignorant. They are dedicated to maintaining white supremacy. Just getting a few jobs for black people. Did I misread here?
No, I think you've got it. And, I think that the real question, so, these are public funds, and folks who work for the city of Detroit have tried lots of different ways to ensure that if there are demolitions that are being conducted using public dollars, especially Detroit taxpayer dollars, that these are funds that should be invested in workers who live in the city of Detroit, and the city employees, city staff have worked really hard to try to make that happen, and kind of, in addition to just individual workers, making accusations, suburban workers being like, well, this is unfair, this is discriminatory, it's become increasingly difficult as a matter of state law for cities like Detroit to ensure that the taxpayer dollars that they are spending are going to, are prioritizing people who even live in their city. And so it is a problem of individual workers who make accusations of so-called reverse racism, which is not a thing. But it is also a matter of laws that prevent municipalities from investing their funds in their people.
Definitely the changes in laws that have taken place over since we got that new president in 2025. That has been massive on many levels across the country. EPA enforcement for the folks in Michigan with this book, like lots of different levels that has had an impact. The section, all of this kind of right in together in talking about the resistance, particularly white male resistance, but white resistance, period, to black people getting better jobs, white dedication to white supremacy, racism. You talk to, so Joel is a black male I'd already mentioned, so-called low-skilled general laborer, just kind of do things on the site, demolition, excavation site. And so they have the white guys, for the most part, they get to actually do the excavating and drive the machine and all that, make a lot more money. So we have Billy, white man, Joel, black male. So they work on these same sites doing the demolition and such. And so Billy, white man, he has encouraged Joel, black male, hey, go do the apprenticeship program. You do the same thing that I do, and you'll, make a lot more money and get vacation and benefits and all that good stuff, man. Like, stop messing around. You can get a better job. And Joel, thank you, appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. Always nice about it, but he doesn't do it. So we keep going, few pages, boom, 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 to get the explanation on all this. This is a little bit further down. This is on 129, I guess, second paragraph, mid-page. You write, on a union-sponsored fishing trip, Billy had heard that local was particularly interested in recruiting Detroiters to be new apprentices. Contractors who employed city residents could earn preferential credit toward bids on municipal contracts, including ones for demolitions, but there were few Detroiters in the union's existing ranks. Billy made the pitch to the half-dozen laborers he regularly worked with, all of whom were city residents. All six thanked him for the information and ultimately declined. Joel explained to me one evening as we cleaned masonry from bricks. He would get the bricks. The demolition season, it has a lull in the wintertime because it gets really cold in those months. And so Joel would go and get these bricks to supplement his income during this time period. He has pictures of that in the book. Continuing. So they would clean the masonry from bricks, stacked and counted them in his backyard. That the location of the union's training facility made Billy's offer a non-starter. The increased pay and relative job security were enticing. But Joel doubted that his truck would make it very long if he had to travel some 100 miles round trip each day for a week at a time. And with those wartime gas prices, even if he could get a new car by earning higher wages, the training facility was in a town well known as home to prominent members of white nationalist organizations. Like Joel, other laborers noted the distance to the training center and the reputation of its neighbors made it a difficult proposition. Tell me about one. I'm so glad that I brought up Tim McVeigh, the Nichols brothers, and the Michigan militia. Lots of things you might bump into in the wilderness out there. But the placement of these facilities, this was not a, oh man, whoops, you mean, that is a long, we didn't think. That's not what this was at all. This was very intentional in where these facilities are. Did I misread?
You did not misread at all. And, these training facilities, they are, the training facility was located in the place that it is, which is, some 50 plus miles from Detroit, in the later part of the 20th century. And I never got, a good explanation from anybody about why, it was like, well, this piece of land was available. And so we put it there. But regardless of the exact reason why, the location of the training facility put it in the early part of the middle of the 20th century in what would have been, an exclusively white, as we talked about earlier, racially restricted place, and would have allowed it to be a place where white men had priority access to the highest paying jobs. Now, fast forward, here we are, 50, 60 years later. It is true that, you have union operators like Billy who are like, hey, I would like to recruit some of the people who I work with every day who do these really hard jobs on my site. I think they'd be good excavator operators. But the decision to place, not a decision that was made 50, 60 years ago continues to bear fruit today, in that, there are prominent members of, as you said, white nationalist organizations who, happen to, who live near this training facility. And so folks, especially, Black folks from Detroit are like, I'm not interested, or, that would be unsafe. I am not interested. And also, you have in Detroit, which has very little in the means of public transportation, where cars are really expensive, where the salt just eats through your car in the winter, going 100-mile round trip every day to get to a training facility, that even for people who are like, I'm willing to do it, that was a really, really big barrier to getting folks out to the training facility. And so this is something where I think it helps us see that, even if we can change individuals' minds, right? Like, and that's important, to change folks like Billy's minds of who they want to see on their work sites. We have to contend with the infrastructural problem too, the ways that white supremacy is quite literally written into geography, into the places where opportunity exists, and how those placements continue to restrict, in this case, Black Detroiters from receiving training. There are Black Detroiters who are union operators who've made that journey and have gotten trained, and but there are many other folks who like Joel did not, because for very good reasons. And I think, if we wanted to change things, we'd have to take those reasons seriously.
If white people wanted to, and I would just go back to that deleted comment, this book's lots of evidence that would suggest there is a massive chunk of white people, they have no interest in seeing things change at all. Love it just the way it is. Like, don't touch a thing. Don't touch a thing. I do, even the request, I can't minimize it totally, but even the fact that these contractors can get these credits if they hire some of these folks who live in the city. It reminded me of some of those programs where certain companies, they might get a tax credit or something if they hire like former convicts or something like that. It had that kind of ring to it. Folks can forgive me if that's wrong, but that it had that kind of sound to it. And even with that, it sounds like you still have a lot of white people, white company owners, nah, we're good. That's why we put the training facilities so far away to begin with. Let's see. I'm sorry.
No, Carrie, sorry, I cut in.
Okay, were you going to add something though?
I think you just about covered it.
Right on. Did you get an opportunity to go out to some of these places, regions where these training facilities are, where they have all these white supremacist organizations?
I did manage to go out to the training facility. I wrote a little bit about, right, like as a white student at the University of Michigan, that meant that I could sometimes call up folks, and especially white demolition firm owners, and they would also talk to me for the afternoon. It was something where, people would say like, "Oh, you remind me of my son. You remind me of my grandson." And so that made it possible for me to access, I got to go out to the union training facility for one afternoon, but it wasn't something that, and it was really far, and my car would not have made it, going back and forth very, very often. So, that was something I got to do once, but I didn't get to do much more than that. I got to talk to demolition contractors a fair bit more though.
Your one visit out there, did you see the white supremacist, white nationalist element? Any symbols or human representatives?
I did not, but I will say, like, as someone who, as I said, I grew up in the Metro Detroit area. Like, this is the kind of place where when I have, you say like, oh, it's near Howell. That's something, usually people's first comment to me, oh, isn't that where the Nazis are? So, and that's something that, it's not just Joel and the folks he works with, that this is I think a commonly known thing, even if I did not see it from the road.
Fascinating. That is important. So even white people, they know, oh man, that's where the Nazis hang. That is, wow. Not ignorant, I would add also. When I heard that, man, it seemed to me like you said, Daisy, she's one of the ones early, very kind of at the beginning of the book, and roof problems and all that. We go hang out with her, and Joel, one of the folk with the bricks and all that, hang out with him, Ken, all that. Man, when I heard about this, the story is out. Howell, that is where the story is. Like, why can't we hang out with them? Like, get 3, 4, 5 folks substitute, so we get like a white Daisy, a white Ken, and hang out so we can get like to the core of why did the white people go out here in the first place? Why are you all making these sort of snarky comments, or why are you all promoting this lie that these few black demolition owners and such in Detroit, that they are hiring people under wage and they're going to mess up, profits for the industry? Why are you all promoting these sorts of lies and such? Why do y'all have the facility way out here? Like, it would seem like the story is out there in Howell.
Yeah, I mean, I think there certainly is a story out there in Howell. And what I found is that story is not, again, as I said, I did not really get an explanation of why the facility was out there in Howell, besides that was beyond what people would tell me. And I think that this maybe shows us something important in that, in this book, I tried to build from the voices of the people who would talk with me and who would share their stories with me. And that was folks like Daisy and Joel and Ken and Billy. But it wasn't necessarily folks who were running training facilities. And while I could talk to contractors, those contractors could also say, well, I don't want you to use that in your book.
Would it be accurate to say that the white people that you spoke with, they were less willing to share information than the black people that you spoke with?
I don't know if they were less willing to share. I can say that it felt like they were more at work. I don't know if they were worried, but they were thinking about like, well, how am I going to appear? I don't want to look bad. And they felt less trusting than the folks who are in this book, who, I think really, I cannot entirely say why, but trusted me enough to like ask me to keep coming around. And so I don't know if white folks were less forthcoming, but they certainly, or why they were less forthcoming, but it felt like they trusted me less.
Now that is, I'm having to take two pieces of information that you gave us, Dr. Caverly. You said that some of these folks, certainly not all, but some of them said, "Oh man, you look just like my grandson. Oh man, you just look like my little brother." And then at the same time, they were less trusting than the people. I don't know, but I'm gonna presume that not too many of the black Detroiters said, "Oh man, you look like my cousin." Oh man, I'm gonna assume you didn't hear that too many. The black people. Thank you. The black Detroiters were more trusting of you, a white man, than the people who and he lived in Michigan. Like he kind of is like one of them. Like it. Wow. Why do you think that is? As an anthropologist and a white man, why do you think that is?
Well, I think that part of what my job is to be honest with people and to be truthful with them about what it is that I'm working on. And so, I could talk to a demolition contractor for the afternoon, or I could talk to somebody for the white demolition contractor for the afternoon. But as soon as we got into the conversation of like, where did these empty buildings come from, right? When talking to many folks who live in Detroit, especially black Detroiters who, lived in Detroit for a long time, his families have lived in Detroit for a while, they are keen observers of their neighborhoods and of their city. And they can say, they can point to the facts that empty buildings were created by white flight, by industrial disinvestment, by racism. And, for white suburbanites, for many of them, there is a kind of received narrative, that is to say, it's not true, but it's powerful, that, empty buildings were created by, black folks who messed up Detroit. And so when talking to somebody and they're like, we're talking about empty buildings, and they're like, yeah, and, black folks really messed up Detroit. And I'm like, oh, well, what do you mean by that? And they're like, oh, well, they took the city and they ruined it. I'm like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, they made all these empty buildings. I'm like, I don't think that's true, right? I don't think it's true. Not even that I know it's not true, right? We have lots of evidence that it's not true. And so the same people who would, answer my phone call or my email and say, hey, yeah, absolutely, come talk. I tended not to get invited back again.
I'm going to take that one as a soft. What the great Neely Fuller Jr. told us, white people cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. They will get in trouble with other white people. And that, we've heard that whenever you get that cold shoulder, we are not going to chat again. I've heard that a few times, like, yep, not behaving correctly as a white man. You're supposed to be a white man and behave correctly. Even that not being willing to share is fact. Both dynamics of that, really, the way that I phrased when I pitched that to Dr. Caverly at the very beginning, like, what is the spiel that you give to Ken or Joel, whomever, the black Detroiters? And he told, I'm a student, blah, blah, blah. The fact that after all the racism that they've experienced, all their experiences with white people, and they still, you're not a cop? You're not here to take my child? Okay. And I even thought with that, like, whoo, are you sure he's not a cop? Like, anyway, the lies about these empty buildings, racist lies, blaming it on black people. I thought I was even going to hear Kwame Kilpatrick, like, oh, that no good thing. He did, it's all his fault. But with Joel, this is the black male, privileged black male, low skilled, where Dr. Caverly, they went to clean the bricks during the down season. He's doing all this to be an upstanding citizen, pay his taxes, keep his property, and all of that. Exactly what's supposed to be hard working American, what you think of, the Midwest and all of that. it reminded me, wait a minute, as soon as and every time that taxes came up in this book, it took a while, but eventually it's like, wait a minute. They just had that massive case where black people were overtaxed, black homeowners were overtaxed like $600 million. And I think about the third or fourth time that the word tax came up in there. Mm-hmm. And I said, man, Joel is out here getting bricks in the winter, in Michigan winter. For anybody out there, we got people that live in Florida and wherever, Caribbean. Man, Michigan winter? Oh my God. They go like ice fishing on the lake and stuff. It is so cold up there. You go getting bricks in December in Michigan, that's like punishment. Chain gang type labor, in my opinion. But he's doing this so he can be an upstanding citizen. Joe has paid his property taxes and probably a whole lot somebody else's property taxes with all of the thieving and conniving in the state of Michigan. Like, oh my gosh, like so many of these black people are trying to do the correct thing with their businesses or just whatever in their personal business, their houses, keeping their property up. And in the background of that, and then you want to talk about structures of white supremacy. And we've been talking about taxes consistently this calendar year, and to get that reminder like, oh my God, they had that massive reveal about that campaign in Michigan, and specifically targeting black. They didn't say this happened to everybody in the state of Michigan. This was black home owners like Daisy, like Joe. I'm not saying that they were victims of this, but I mean $600 million worth. Just can you juxtapose? Because it seems like you met a lot of hardworking black people, black attempted homeowners who were not tax cheats. They were trying to do the best that they could to keep up with their property taxes and their property. Is that what I read?
That is exactly correct. And to kind of continue on with it, so Bernadette Atuene has written a book called Plundered, which is all about, I believe, the case that you're talking about, which is the tax foreclosure system that predominantly dispossessed black Detroiters of their homes. It stole family wealth. It stole family homes from black Detroiters. And this is a system that was put in place around 1997, I believe, and continues to this day, a system of tax foreclosure that a lot of the rhetoric that propelled the tax foreclosure process into law was this saying, well, people just need to keep up, black folks in Detroit need to keep up their houses, need to pay their taxes, need to pay their fair share, and meanwhile, their fair share is actually like 4 or 5 or 6 times as large as somebody else's, or as like what their house would be taxed at in a predominantly white suburb, and it's taxed that high because Detroit's taxes are incredibly high in order to afford all of what are called the legacy costs of racist disinvestment. So paying for infrastructure built for 1.8 million people that services around 700,000 people today. And so all of these things are at work in this book. And as you said, right, like for the most part, I think almost everybody I met in Detroit was just trying to live their life and was just trying to keep their house, was just trying to, make sure that their bills got paid, and was trying to figure out how to make things happen in order to do that. And I think that is a real striking juxtaposition with the ways that Detroiters in general, but also especially black Detroiters are figured within the broader politics of the state of Michigan, where, and this shouldn't be surprising, I'm sure, to you or to your listeners, but, the way that the effects of white supremacy in the world are then turned around and blamed, right? So empty buildings are then blamed on black Detroiters, even when those buildings were produced by white flight. And that's something that is not unique, again, to Detroit or to Michigan, but is really emblematic of how our the racist state of our politics, and how, yes, the dude who's in the White House, he's a special brand, but he is nothing new.
It couldn't be Make America Great Again if he were that new. I mean, hey,
yeah.
he's not saying that I'm trying to come out and make something new and creative. I'm just trying to get us back to where we were. When I got like to the mid chunk, so I'm reading about Joel and Ken and all that, and when I read it, I said, wait a minute, did Dr. Caverly, even though you were a student at this time, but did Dr. Caverly, did he say he hopped in the training program with the other folks? And I said, wait a minute. And I kept reading like, he did say he jumped in the training program. And it happened a few times. Like, what? I know you anthropologists and you said your methodology and going out and talking to folks, but I mean, man, like what was the thought process in you saying, yes, I'm going to join and be a part of some of these training programs that, and some of these where it seems like you might have been the only white person there. I think you even called that out a few times, that, they got these other black people and me, and black or non-white people and me. What was the thought process about you hopping in to join them?
I mean, so a lot of that is, the goal for ethnographic research is to meet people where they are and to sit with them as they live their lives. And so there were, so as we were talking about, right, like the union training programs, they were located, really far from Detroit. They were really inaccessible. And so there were some efforts to make training programs that were either in Detroit or close to Detroit. They were not union training programs, but they did exist. And they were things that people were often paying their fees using, there were a variety of kind of like public programs that would pay for people who were unemployed to learn new skills. That was typically what was paying those fees. I had research grants that paid my fees. They did not, and So this was a way to meet people where they were, to learn about the process of, how does someone become somebody who works on a demolition site or participates in demolition as a kind of a way of paying their bills. So that was part of what I had the opportunity to do, and so that was a way that I found it to be a good way to meet people who were doing this kind of work.
I'm still, Dr. Caverly, like, I'm still kind of at the WTH stage. Like, even hearing that, like, he paid his money. So let's start, because you did it a few times. So let's start the demolition training. So here, were you the only white person?
No, I was not. I think there was another white dude in my demolition training class.
Okay. Or it seems like it was mostly white, but mostly non-white.
It was mostly black folks, and then there were a couple, mostly black men, and then there were a couple Latinos, and then there was the two white dudes, I think.
Okay, I misspoke. Thank you. Mostly black dudes, and then he said the two, like the white dude, you.
This is an audio medium, so your audience cannot see me, but I'm like like 6 foot tall, but I was really skinny at this time, so I'm not very imposing as dude goes.
Okay, but he is white.
Yep.
That counts for a lot, even 3 feet tall. So did the other, like, individuals in the training cohort, did they think you were just another person coming through the training, or did they think you were coming through doing a project, or what?
Yeah, with everything, right? I was never like a fly on the wall, like, mystery person, right? I would say, hey, I'm Nick, I'm a student, I'm doing a research project about demolition, and I mean, as part of this, like I'm trying to learn everything I can about demolition, and that's why I'm here. And, you know, the folks who were there, we had a discussion about like whether it would be okay for me to use anything that had happened in the training program to, you know, as part of my research, or what parts it would be okay to use and what parts it would not be okay to use.
Did any of the non-white people, I guess you said most of the non-white people were trusting, but did any of the non-white people, they say, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to be a part of your research doing all this?
Yeah. People told me that. Or, you know, people would say, you know, I mean, and this is a project that developed over a long time. Initially, it wasn't a book. It was just a thesis project. And so in the process from making it, turning it into a book, I got back in touch with people and I was like, hey, you know, we talked about these, you know, we talked about these things years ago. I want to make sure it's still okay that I'm going to try to make a book out of this, which means that, like, I don't think a lot of people will read it, but some people might read it. And I want to make sure that this is an okay way for you to be represented here.
I see. Fascinating. Are you aware, because my understanding, like, so you said you paid your money and all of that, this training program tried to get Detroiters jobs and such. Did you or anyone have concerns that maybe a non-white person or someone who needed a spot, that they were missing out because you were getting that spot?
Yeah, I had concerns around that. So part of what I made sure was that, like, I wasn't taking up a spot from somebody, but then something, you know, so for the trainings that I did, I made sure that was not the case, that there was a free spot or there was an available spot that I could be in without taking it from anybody. But I remember, you know, something initially, there's a kind of history of anthropologists who study work and labor, of that people will go work jobs, and in order to learn about them, to be like, okay, well, you know, I could tell you a lot more about what it is to drive an excavator if I had done it a lot. I did not do it a lot. I did it in a training yard, and I talked to people who did it. But there are other people who, if they were to study a job, they would be like, okay, you would have to go work as an excavator operator or something for a while. And I had this, so initially I thought I would do that. And I had this demolition contractor who told me, you know, they were like, oh, it's great that you're gonna get this training, because then maybe we can bring you on as an intern, and you can work on demolition sites as an intern, like an unpaid intern. And I was like, but, like, wouldn't you have to pay somebody if you didn't have me as an unpaid intern? And like, yeah, but, like, you'll learn stuff and then we'll get some demolitions done. And that made me feel really gross. The idea that I would be not, you know, unpaid intern, I've done that in my life, but the idea that I would be taking a job away from somebody. And so I decided at that point that I wouldn't go work demolition, because that would be taking a job away from somebody.
Right on. Context of white supremacy. And so, like I said, I'm reading Demolishing Detroit, and this pops up a few times where he's going and training. And so we heard the excavation. He said he didn't get to do too much driving. Maybe, thank goodness. I don't know how good he got in the training program, but he said he didn't get to do too much of it. He said not great. And then he does the asbestos training. Man, and he has pictures in the book of all of the danger postings and such that they have throughout, I guess, the training facility and all of that. And whoa, careful, don't touch, danger, all of that. And so I'm reading that. This is at the bottom of 146, very last paragraph. He writes, in his early 30s, when we met, Rayshawn was the father of 2 children. Like most asbestos abatement laborers I came to know well, he was black, privileged black males, and under the supervision of the Criminal legal system. Among the trainees who filed in to the drab conference room that morning, some, including Rayshawn, were present as a condition of early release from state prisons. Others were there as part of programs for recently unemployed people. The other was me. That alone is kind of staggering. Like, woo, man. Even I'll pause. So, same thing. Let's get the racial dynamics here. So, were you the only white person here?
Yeah, I think so. In that room, there was a later part of the training where I wasn't the only white person, but in that room, I think I was.
White power. As Rayshawn described it, a prison reentry preparedness counselor had offered asbestos as a peculiar sort of magical mineral, one that could secure him a livable wage and an early return to his family. Others reported similar conversations. That's kind of scary, really. Like, if they've got this codified, like, say, inmate number 26795, do you want to get out to see your children? There's this I'm wounded. Let me get back to it. That is kind of staggering. I mean, did it really sound like they've got this is their spiel that they've got, we're going, magic, that's what we'll say. Did it sound like that for real?
Well, I mean, so magic mineral that is what asbestos is called. It way back when we were dumping asbestos into insulation, into drywall, into plaster, into just about everything we build buildings out of. It was referred to as a magic, like, quote, magic mineral, end quote, because it's basically indestructible and quite fireproof. And so that right there in that paragraph was me talking about how, it was talked about for people like Rayshawn as like, hey, here is a new opportunity that you can, if you want to try out this training, like, here's a way to get a job that was paying much more than the state minimum wage. It was a wage that could support a family, and so it was offered as a kind of magic mineral in a different kind of way. And this isn't limited to asbestos. We have lots of examples across the United States of the way our criminal legal system, offers people a chance to get out, but under conditions that are not good. Employment in industries that might pay well, but often come with a lot of really harmful side effects.
Make you go fight fires where you might die or get third-degree burns. Like, it's going to be something kind of dangerous. Frequently, I just thank you for the clarification, but that was kind of my thinking, that they had some sort of spiel lie, really, that, hey, you can get out of jail and all of this, but it's going to be, and generally minimizing the danger component of this for people who, not judging, but I'll just say I think the data might support that the prison population, you generally don't have Dr. Caverly, you generally don't have lots of PhDs in the prison population. Not saying that people with doctorates don't commit crimes, just generally that's not who we lock up first. Continuing, it says, due to the volume of abatement work necessary to prepare buildings for demolition, state-certified abatement laborers could earn up to $18 per hour, almost triple the statewide minimum wage at the time. A shortage of certified workers also meant abatement contractors were eager to hire people. Eager to hire people like Rayshawn, even if employers in other sectors regularly refused to hire someone with a carceral record. Indeed, within weeks of completing the training, Rayshawn was working on an abatement site with a starting wage of $19.25. State officials cited the trajectories of people like Rayshawn as inspiration to enroll currently incarcerated people in asbestos abatement trainings. The hope was that people who completed carceral training programs could draw wages from the moment of their release. Even again, just kind of putting this on the scale of black male privilege. But so you go and enroll in this training program, and so same thing. You said, "Hey, I'm transparent." You let everybody know this is what I'm doing and all that. And so did any of the folks? I mean, some of these folks are there because this is how I'm trying to get out of greater confinement. Did any of the convicted folks, did they have a problem with you doing this research and chatting it up with them?
I mean, yeah, there are people who were in that training who are not in this book because they said they didn't want to. I think that Rayshawn is someone who really helped me to see, to kind of crystallize all of the many different things that were at work here. How, this is a system that was promising release from confinement, as you say, but at the same time, dumping things on people and constraining them in new ways. And that's something that, an argument that, I don't think I really needed somebody like Rayshawn to put it into words. It was really helpful to have somebody like Rayshawn put it into words for me.
You all went through your Rayshawn, yourself, all the other mostly black dudes, non-white people. You all went through the training program. You're right. It was not the pop-up decontamination area and protective gear were props brought in as part of an event organized to formally recognize Detroiters who had recently completed asbestos worker training courses. Newly certified workers, some of them wearing coveralls, respirators, and goggles, used the chamber as a backdrop for celebratory photos with family and supporters. When Rayshawn and I finished our course, Brenda handed our certificates of completion over a lunch from the nearby Szechuan takeout. And I said, wow, they did anyway, they did the whole training and all that stuff. But man, I said, Dr. Caverly, did you, I guess, grasp, I don't know if even irony is the correct word here, but for lack of a better term, I guess the irony of them going and celebrating when going to do asbestos removal, like this is something, oh man, you could die, like you could suffer and die, like getting that stuff in your lungs, like that is not I'll just go get, a shot, or like, oh man, like that could be awful. Like, I don't know, did they or you all grasp kind of the, like, an irony might not even be the best word. If you can help out, if there's a better word than that, you can fill in.
I mean, I think that people know that what they are, the entire point of asbestos abatement trainings is to reinforce to people again and again and again that asbestos is a dangerous material, and that the work that they are doing is to keep other people safe, to keep people in there. If you're demolishing a building, if you run it through with an excavator without an asbestos abatement and it's got asbestos containing drywall in it, that asbestos is going to go everywhere across the neighborhood. And so the work of asbestos abatement keeps people, in this case, folks who live around empty buildings in Detroit, it helps keep them safe. And so people, I don't know, I know they weren't ignorant, right? Like they're incredibly talented. Like, to do asbestos abatement work, you have to be incredibly talented and incredibly skilled. And so they were aware of, but like this kind of thing is to get what you're getting at, right? Like, it's kind of a sleight of hand, right? It's like, oh, well, people have been informed about the hazards of their job. That's all we got to do, as opposed to asking, well, is there another way to do this so that we don't have to create these hazards to begin with?
I think he started off correctly saying that Rayshawn has 2 children. I think there are many parents who would do a lot of sacrifices to get back to their offspring. Totally reasonable. I got it. But man, and I just, the prison, same thing I said before. Generally, the people in the prison population, not saying that they're stupid, but just generally, that's not where the PhD folks are. Oftentimes, that's not even where the high school diploma folks are. Not judging, just saying the data, from time to time would suggest that sort of thing. And even the literacy rates in the prisons. And the desperation of people in the prisons. I would take all of that. Maybe they grasp the dangers of asbestos removal. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe they do not. Either way, man, and particularly when you continue reading and they're talking about these respirators that they get, and they don't even, Rayshawn's, his respirator is broken. And man, it would be, even if I had just foreknowledge of what's going to happen in your book, Demolishing Detroit, it would be hard to celebrate at this event. Like, man, I'm gonna go outside and get some fresh air, if that's even possible. Let's go drive to where the white people live and see if we can get some fresh air, and just we'll sit quietly and when we don't have that crackling in our lungs, we got all that black stuff in our lungs. And with given all of that, you were gonna go. You had your suit. You've done your training, certified and everything. You had your mask. You were going to go and do some of the removal with Rayshawn?
You know, they say youth makes you stupid. But yeah, I mean, that was something that I wanted to do, right? I wanted to see inside of, like, what did an abatement look like while it was in process? And Rayshawn was like, no, buddy, you're not doing that. And that was something that, again, like, that was a moment in which he was like, why would you do that? Like, why would you, as someone who, and he put it, he was like, right, like, you have these soft suburb lungs. And so part of what, as you noted, right, asbestos and air pollution, polluted air in general, right, it literally hardens your lung tissue. And that's something you learn over and again in asbestos trainings, that, you know, one of the dangers that asbestos poses is that it creates these little plaques in your lungs that harden your lung tissue and make it difficult to breathe. And as Rayshawn and, you know, other people who I got to know framed, they were like, you know, we've grown up in places where there are steel mills or car factories or, you know, waste processing facilities. And, like, this, you know, asbestos abatement is not our first encounter with these kinds of hazards. And, you know, I grew up in the suburbs, and not in an industrial suburb, in a kind of, like, bedroom commuter suburb. I did not grow up next to any kind of an industrial hazard. And, you know, that was something that we had talked about. And they're like, why would you go, you know, if you have these, they called them suburb lungs, why would you risk them? And, you know, that was something that helped. I was like, okay, right? Like, they're like, you're not doing it, right? Maybe you can find a different crew that'll let you come through with them, but we're not letting you do that.
That D word I just said, desperation. Would you really do this if this is the only way I'm going to get back to my children? Desperate. But man, I read that, and part of this could be influenced. You are a white anthropologist. I just read the worst book ever, and it happens to be about a white anthropologist. And he also did a lot of going to talk to black people and asking them a lot of questions. And anthropologists did the same thing you did. And in the Midwest, no less, in Chicago. But it was so awful, his work, just all of it, just peeping and asking all these questions and no product at all. It seemed very pornographic to me. But when I read this section here, I said, dang, Rayshawn, privileged black male, convict, this is the only way that he can get out to his children is to go and put some poison in his lungs. And he's the one that, whoa, you can't do this, doctor. Come on, this is goofy. Stop being stupid. You're young, what does it say? Young, dumb, stop being stupid. Come on. But I said, man, I said, I'm going to ask him. I said, why? I'll put it that way, form of a question. You were told because of your soft suburb lungs, why did you let a black male with a broken respirator, underline that, Rayshawn has a broken respirator, why did you let a black male with a broken respirator protect your health while you were there to study his?
Yeah, that is an incredibly good question. And I think that, something I talk about in the book is how occupational health regulators, environmental health regulators, underfunded as they are in Michigan, we're also trying to make sure that abatement workers had as good of equipment as they deserve, not even as they deserve, had working and good equipment. And something that, I do write about is that there was a moment when Rayshawn had a broken respirator and a member of the regulatory state showed up and was like, hey, you should they weren't an occupational health regulator. And they were like, you should probably call occupational health and safety. You should have a working respirator. Here is a temporary one. And, folks that I knew, and this is something that got reported in the press by journalists at the time, working conditions in abatement labor, in asbestos abatement for demolition were not good. And so something I talked with a lot of folks about, including Rayshawn, but also other abatement workers, was like, hey, do you want to do something about this, right? Do you all want, there are these journalists who are writing these stories. Do you want to talk to, I didn't know the journalists, but I was like, we could try to find them. Do you want to talk to, occupational health regulators? Do you want to, is there another kind of work you would want to do? And I was both frustrated, but also, accepted that, when people like Rayshawn said, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do, as you said, to support my family. This is my way of navigating the horizon of possibilities that are available to me. And that is something that I ultimately just chose to respect their decisions to do that. Even though it was incredibly frustrating to watch, kind of angering to watch people who were working without the kind of protection that they needed.
It's that dynamic, Rayshawn, him holding you back from preserving the soft suburb lungs, where he can take it. I'm hardy. I can go in and do all of this, man. And even Dr. Caverly in the book, he makes that in this chapter on asbestos removal, really, that is the chapter subheading, suburb lungs. It's in all capital letters, bold-faced print. I said, oh, wow, he got that from Rayshawn. I mean, it's explained in the book, got that from Rayshawn. But, man, I said, that is like total, even put it in the form of a question. Is that the ultimate act of white supremacy, letting the oppressed shield the researcher from the very poison that you are documenting?
I can't say that it is. I don't know if it's the ultimate act of white supremacy, but it certainly is one way that we can see how racism happens and how white supremacy endures. That this, the way that, we have these empty buildings that are produced by white flight from Detroit, by racist disinvestment, and the way that we're going to get them torn down safely, allegedly, in compliance with regulation is to do asbestos abatement. And that very process is a process that, while it protects people on the outside of the plastic sheeting that abatement laborers put up to make sure that asbestos is, contained in this airtight way, protects people on the outside, it concentrates hazards for people on the inside. And that is something that I think really shows us the ways that we have to think about more than just a question of like, okay, well, are we doing things like, taking this action in compliance with regulation? Sure, that's what it was doing, right? Or are we doing this in accordance with what meets like the standard for safety, which it was, but that safety itself, producing that, was an action that concentrated harm in the places that abatement workers were breathing. And those abatement workers were predominantly Black men, and that is a way that, yes, we absolutely do see white supremacy enduring.
If I heard correctly, you said maybe not the ultimate act of white supremacy, but an act of white supremacy nonetheless, in having broken respirator Rayshawn protect Dr. Caverly, from the poisons of asbestos. I heard correctly?
Yeah, I believe you did hear correctly that, the actions of abatement workers are actions that, while they are doing this work that is protecting people on the outside of the abatement zone, we are seeing the ways that anti-blackness and white supremacy are concentrated on the inside of the abatement site.
And that would be you doubly protected, because you grew up in one of those areas that would have been outside the asbestos and all the other toxic lead. I was thinking Freddie Gray, because we were just talking about Baltimore, but and oh my God, we were just talking about lead. I can't say our last program because we broadcasted Sunday, but the program before last, we were just talking about lead. Oh, we had a privileged black male educator, Dr. Caverly. He attempted to tell his students, high school, he attempted to tell his students about lead. He didn't mention Freddie Gray. He didn't even mention environmental racism. He was just telling it's dangerous. Oh, matter of fact, the context, they were studying the periodic table. I'm not a scientist, but I think lead is on there. So he's just going over the elements. This is one. You don't want this one in your water. Mess your brain computer. Some of the same things that you go over in the book. That was enough to get him in trouble. And I said, "Are you serious? Like, did you mention Freddie Gray, or are you sure you didn't say environmental racism? Did you mentioned Robert Bullard? I know." He's no, Gus. I promise you, I did not say environmental racism. I didn't say Freddie Gray. None of that. We had the periodic table. I thought I was saying something truthful. You don't want lead in your water, which I thought was true. I would have been thankful to have a teacher tell me that very early on. No lead. You do not want this in your, period. No lead. Whoopee. Remember that teacher's name? No, you get in trouble. And then in some places, Dr. Caverly. Anyway, the super or suburb lungs, is that collateralizing, make sure I pronounce it correctly, by making that Rayshawn's kind of protection, shielding of you, protecting white people, as generally happens to be, is that collateralizing his kindness by using that phrase in the book, even though I'm assuming, since you told us the process, that he did authorize it. But is that still kind of collateralizing this black male convict and him protecting you, a white man?
When Rayshawn and I talked about this, and when I talked about, when I asked people, hey, can I use your, can I use your story, or can I use, this set of words that you've just said? Part of what we talked about is how this is about building from the analysis that people are already making. Because a lot of times, or I don't know if a lot of times, but when your research as anthropologists do, right, we're talking to people in their lives, in their homes, at their jobs, and people, there's nothing that makes people with a PhD, you've been saying like there aren't a lot of PhDs and, we don't find a lot of incarcerated people with PhDs. That's not necessarily because a PhD means you're smart or anything like that, but, you stayed in school for a while. But part of what we try to do is to show the analysis that people are already making and to build from that and to show how, and especially in this chapter about asbestos abatement, Rayshawn's words, Rayshawn pointing out this kind of division between suburb lungs and city lungs, that was something that, repeatedly over the years I asked. I was like, hey, this is really, really, this is an incredibly good analysis of what's happening here. And I wanted to treat Rayshawn's words in the same ways that I treat, the books or articles that I'm in conversation with in the book by, I would cite them directly and I would use, I would say for example, Lundy Braun has this really great book about how white supremacy is baked into the spirometer, which is the device that we use to measure breathing. I cite Lundy Braun by name and I give it direct quotes, and in that same way, I cite Rayshawn by name, and I, within the kind of the limitations of human subjects research, so I'm not allowed to use his real name, I cite him by name.
I guess that does, it's a little different for a citation for you or Professor Braun, as opposed to, that's presumably that's not even Rayshawn's real name. So it's not like people will get to look him up and do interviews to come and explain your concept of suburb.
Yeah.
Julie,
no, you're absolutely right. You're right. And it is something that Rayshawn and I talked about. I was like, hey, I can find another way to think through this. I don't, and he said to use it. So I tried to respect that.
Okay. Did he get a signed copy of the book, Rayshawn?
Yes.
Right on.
He got a copy of the book, and his kid asked me to sign it. Yes.
Right. Oh, that's right on. Right on. That's nice, since they got a kind of soft shout out in the book. Right on for them. Before we let you enjoy the rest of your Monday, given that you're informed about that fleecing of black homeowners, mostly in Detroit, with the taxation, fraudulent taxation and the foreclosures, you write the administrative hopes were that demolitions would create financial possibility, given the $600 million in overassessments that occurred during these exact demolition years. Wasn't that hope actually a documented lie used to distract from the active looting of black neighborhoods?
Well, I think that I cannot say that it was a lie. I do not have evidence that it was a lie. But what I can say is that I think that, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars in demolitions in Detroit at the same time as you were talking about that. Many folks in Detroit, especially black folks in Detroit, were having their homes stolen out from under them. And that raises the question of how are we investing our public funds? So, if we're investing our public funds in tearing down empty buildings, why is it that we are creating more empty buildings by stealing people's homes from out from under them? And, there are the city of Detroit, state of Michigan have a lot of folks, a lot of different offices, a lot of people with competing kinds of priorities. So the people who, had administrative hopes that tearing down buildings would create, better prospects for people living in Detroit were not necessarily the same folks who were in charge of tax foreclosure. But the fact, as you said, right? So like, I don't think that people who hoped that demolitions would make a better future, I don't think they were lying. However, I think it's really important to shine a light on the ways that we invested a lot of money in demolishing buildings while also creating more empty buildings by stealing people's houses out from under them.
Black people's houses out from
Precisely.
under them. And Andrew Carl, he mentioned this years ago, where he said with the taxes, that is so nefarious and that is such a powerful weapon for people classified as white, because a lot of times, talk about not being willing to share information, a lot of times it can be difficult to get information in terms of taxes, and then there's such a long record of black people disproportionately paying taxes. Andrew, he did a whole report about that, where he was saying he, even as a white man, was having difficulty accessing records about property taxes. They were looking, when he would go to ask, people would look at him like, who are you? What do you need these records for? Like, all of these questions, I thought they were public. Like, what's, maybe, for what purposes? Like, concealing information that is massively important in the system of white supremacy racism. And again, some of this is influenced by, I just read the worst book ever in my life, and there was a white anthropologist right at the center of it. So some of this, maybe if we had chatted at another time, I would have had this in the brain computer, but there are so many books and projects and fake projects where white men, white women go peeping on black people and asking them really invasive questions about their bank account or finances or sexual practices, and written books about this, and none of that has solved the problem. What makes Demolishing Detroit different?
Well, I think that, part of what I'm trying to do here, as I said, I don't think I'm solving the problem. I think I'm pointing to the problem in different ways. And I think that part of what I tried to do in the book is point out the ways that to address white supremacy, right, we have to change the people who our policies listen to. We probably shouldn't be asking people who benefit from the status quo whether we should change the status quo. And when we're thinking about, what is it going to take to change the status quo? Yes, we have to think about, ideological change, and we have to think about changes to our economic system, and we have to think about changes to the way that our environment works. And primarily we have to just, it's about, quite simply, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore says, right, change everything. But that is something that people do manage to do in everyday ways. They manage to do these things at the scale of their individual neighborhood. And I think that folks in Detroit have something to teach all of us about what does it look to make systems of white supremacy work differently.
I'm remembering the white demolition executives who live outside of Detroit grousing about hiring these old and they did the name calling. That's when I pay attention to white people, when they start name calling, because it harkens to Negra, coon, all of it. They didn't say that. They said you hire all these scabs. They even got a racial history of that. You bring in, who is the scab? You can bring in all these Negra scabs to mess over their wages. But yeah, they said you're bringing these scabs in to mess up the wages. And Dr. Caverly even told us that's not true. We don't know if they were lying about the hope at the same time that they were stealing, but he did say that is a lie to say that these black business excavators and black demolition operators, businesses in the Detroit area, to say that they are pulling down wages and such. That is a lie. They hire at scale, maybe not union workers, but at scale. It's scabs. You talked about the history of parasitum in Michigan, really the entire world, in terms of the system of white supremacy. That's how the whole thing operates. But the thriving of this parasitum in Detroit, and bragging about it to a degree, because you talked about how some of the suburbs, they had a tradition of bragging that we don't have no niggers here, and we don't have no pollution here either, so you can have those nice, soft suburb lungs. Now that you've spent all of these years peeping on, to a degree, and talking to these black people in their struggle in Detroit. Even I was reminded of slumming to a degree when I got to the portion where you were doing the training with Rayshawn and these different black people. It did remind me of that Malcolm X, where he talked about different black people, or excuse me, different white people coming to hang out in the ghettos and slums and all of that to get like an authentic experience. I even think that word was used. In fact, that word was used from the white anthropologist in that wretched book, The Authentic Experience. He would go out and hang out with these interracial couples, and it had to be authentic. So he would have to go and get a black girl himself to make it authentic. But it reminded me of that concept of slumming, and with you going to get the asbestos gear and the training and even did the excavation training. Is this a form of parasitum too, the research that you did here, Dr. Caverly?
Well, I think something that, again, this is something that I think Rayshawn shows really well. I could get all of the training, but I wasn't late. If I would have gone in and labored, it wouldn't have been about having an authentic experience, right? And like, my goal here was not to have an authentic experience as an asbestos abatement worker. And, something that I think my goal here was to show how the very same system that produced empty buildings, right, which is to say parasitism, right, the extraction of wealth and of livelihood from Detroit, the way that it was cloistered and siloed within its majority white suburbs, that same system also shapes the process of eliminating those empty buildings. And that's something that if we want to change that, right, we have to look at it. And maybe, if we were to say like, well, who should be at the table in doing things like designing a different kind of way of organizing, let's say, excavator labor, we maybe wouldn't want to put excavator, demolition, white suburban demolition firm owners at that table, because they've shown us already that they're not so interested in playing in a kind of fair ecosystem for excavator operators.
Wow. That, I'm just reminding listeners, that's 2 days in a row, mind you, we've had projects where we've heard white people in the Midwest specifically. We had Illinois yesterday, Michigan today, but white people specifically complaining black people are going to come and get our resources and goodies. That's like consistently for that to come. And sometimes it's not even true, but they still have that fear or gripe, grouse, whatever you want to call it. Man. If we have, we do generally have a lot of folks in Michigan. So one, I'll tell the folks out there, if you want to take a gander to see some of the information in the text, see if you think it's accurate based on your knowledge. Some of the folks who live in the Detroit area, the full title, again, Demolishing Detroit, How Structural Racism Endures. If any of our Michigan listeners have a quick question they want to get in before we let Dr. Caverly enjoy the rest of his Monday evening. I guess the book has been, man, it's still, even though pretty brand new, it's barely been out 4 months. What response have you gotten from Daisy, Ken, Rayshawn, Joel, some of the black Detroiters that you hung out with the most? What have they said now that the book's been out?
I mean, so these are the folks who are in the book. They've seen versions of it over the past few years. And so this is something where the kind of final copy of the book, I think, by the end of February of last year, so February of 2025 was when I finished the final draft of it. So they had seen the final draft of it and gotten to comment on it at that point. It was nice to be able to, I was able to share the book, the final, send copies to folks. And, I don't know, I think, so by and large, the piece of it has been, oh, wow, we didn't think you were ever going to actually get around to writing that book. I guess you did. So, I mean, kind of surprised. That's probably been the most widespread feeling about it. It's like, oh, well, you did finally get around to writing that. And, okay, right? Like, it's kind of like, this is something that is part of my job. And it's like, okay, so you did a good thing at work. That was nice. And thank you for including our stories in it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess it did take some time. You did say you spent years putting this whole project together and studying, then it took years to do the actual writing. So yeah, I guess it's not actual. I guess, yeah, I probably would think he forgot all about us, or he's out in New England doing other things, and oh wow, he didn't forget it. He did. Oh, okay. Anyway, moving on, and plus even all that looting, that would erode a lot too. I don't know how, optimistic or what have you I would feel, just man, we're still in a system of white supremacy, racism, and they did steal all that money from us. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow, type thing. Anywho, much obliged for sharing a bit of your Monday evening. I will say, for the folks this is such a Detroit-focused book, and we do have a lot of listeners who are in the Michigan area. If you have any sort of connections to Detroit, if you live in Detroit or have black people who are connected there, might be one. It's not massively long to be intimidating, that you could read, wouldn't take forever, and get some information on the system of white supremacy locally. At minimum, some of the employment information. No black male privilege in this. But did I miss that? Did you see any black male privilege in your study?
No, I did not.
Definitive. Again, Demolishing Detroit, How Structural Racism Endures. Great double entendre in the title. Much obliged for hanging out with us this evening. Appreciated the thoroughness in your responses, Dr. Caverly.
Oh, thank you for having me, sir. My pleasure's been all mine.
Much obliged, sir. Another white it's been a lot of them, white anthropologists. Wow. Anyway, we will keep an eye out for your future work. Stay warm up there in New England, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Context of White Supremacy. Again, Dr. Nicholas Caverly, Demolishing Detroit. I used to work with people who lived in the Detroit area, and it used to be popular for whatever reason. It used to be a popular thing, oh man, y'all should come up and hang out with us in Detroit. It'll be so much fun, blah, blah, blah. I never did that for whatever reason. I was never yes. We even in the summertime, I don't do cold, so obviously I'm not January, February, no time there. I'm going, but man, oh man, cold, no way. Even in the summertime, though, I'm not really excited about going to Detroit. I generally, even before Renisha McBride and all that, and again, Renisha McBride, that is not exactly Detroit, but it's close enough. I just did not hear enough good things, especially for black people. I'm a pass. I'm good. I've got Joe Lewis. I'm a pass. I'm a pass. I'll watch it on TV. If something good happens, I'll watch it on TV. They'll have it on YouTube, I'm sure. Any hoodles. Black male privilege. Wow. that did stand out to me in the book, and that is not even, he doesn't use that phrase in the book or anything like that, but just, wow, the black male experience in this text is not one that also would not make me, as a black dude, want to go to Detroit. Think I'm going to have a grand experience, and it's going to be spectacular, and woo, Kwame Kilpatrick. And if anything, what I said, Tim McVeigh, and isn't this the state where they were going to kidnap the governor? They is white people. You know that ain't Leroy. Isn't this where they were going to kidnap the governor? They were mad about the COVID. Yes, that is Michigan. What does it mean to be white? Take quick break. We'll be right back. Context of white supremacy. Let folks know what we'll be up to for the rest of the week. Stay tuned. Right back. Take a quick break. Man, we have been broadcasting a lot. Let's see.
Got another term on there, VGQ. What does that mean? Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Now, that keeps you from getting in arguments with other black people, particularly on television, which I get sick of that. Black people shouting. You know, we get into our ghetto thing once we get on television and get wound up. And we start all yelling at once. And the racists sit there smugly and just look. They watch the tennis match, so to speak. Right. And black people are shouting each other down, talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, and so and so and so and so, and we go into our Amos and Andy and Sapphire Act. Okay? VGQ means Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Guaranteed qualification to do what? To give your opinion on anything about race. Don't care what it is. If you're on there with Minister Farrakhan, or you're on there with Mike Tyson, or you on there with Miss, what's her name, Williams, the lady that had him put in, recommended that he be put in jail, or you on there with anybody. So you don't cut the other black person down. Now, I don't even like that term brother and sister, even though it's been around for about 30 years. Well, I ain't going to talk about the brother here, no. See, we haven't reached that stage where we can do that. See, we got to crawl before we walk, but we don't miss any steps. Don't say you are what you're not. Don't say you feel something that you don't really feel. You don't really feel that he's a brother. I usually use the expression, I don't like anybody in here. I say that to all audiences. I haven't been taught to like anybody. I've been taught to dislike people. Been taught that. Right. And then they're taught to dislike me, so it's just compounded disliking. I haven't even got to love yet. All right? So what we do is minimize conflict, try not to hurt each other. So a certain thing, that's what a code is for. It's a stopgap. It keeps me from saying something against you. You say, well, don't you agree with what this person just said down here on the other end and whatnot? That person has VGQ, Mr. Donahue. I keep using him because he's one of the most prominent TV people. Right. But the main thing you do is try to stay off of a radio program or TV program or even a neighborhood stage program, you might say, where you spend your time shouting back and forth at other black people. Nothing is getting done there. And when it's done on television, a lot of black people just get up from the TV set and go on in the kitchen somewhere once that shouting starts. Yeah, they get disgusted. They say, oh, here we go. They started off okay, but now they're doing a job on each other, and I don't even want to hear it. So just don't do it. And you cut it off. The cutoff point is that person has Victims Guaranteed Qualification. You spell it out what it means. Meaning the person can say anything about race that they want to, and I can say anything about it that I want to. You are guaranteed that. You earn that as a victim. Simply by being a victim. Now, if a white person says something, that's something else.
Indeed. context of white supremacy. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button in the top right corner. You'll see the links for Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Amazon wish list as well. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who've kept us on the air for 17 years. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. I did want to say I do encourage, and I have encouraged, I think I'm on check my record, right? For, I don't know if I've said it for the full 17 years, but I've said it for some years. Study local history. Very important. That is one way you can learn about the system of white supremacy, racism, wherever you happen to be in the world. If that's Johannesburg, Istanbul, Trinidad, Detroit. Study local history, because you can study racism, white supremacy anywhere in the world. You can go back and your specific county, parish, state, province, what has been the black experience there, what's been the race soldier experience there, all of it. That can be, and as I've said, that can be like a family project, that can be a personal project for people. If you say, hey man, I'm in an area, I don't have a lot of non-white people who are interested in white supremacy, racism. That's not something that they want to talk about or, discuss. They don't want to, review Neely Fuller's work or anything like that, or come up with some new concept, talk about things in the workplace. They don't want to talk about any of that. No problem. You can have projects that you like, legitimate projects, legitimate data, working towards solving a problem. You can do that united, independent, by your lonesome. And I was going to say you can go to the library, which is true. University library, local public library, community college library, whatever. Or you could sit on your porch. Springtime, pretty much, right? You could sit on your porch, phone, device, whatever, and be doing some serious study. But studying local history, that's a massive one. And I had meant to, because I know we have a number of listeners in the Michigan area, to see if they, want to ask anything, especially if we have folks who have connection to Detroit specifically, if they've endured any of these incidents of racism, or commentary on, the way he kind of shared information from his book, Demolishing Detroit. But my fault, I forgot about it, had lots of questions, even one of them because Dr. Caverly in his book, he uses the term cosplaying, where you do the whole get up and get your costume and go out and do all this. You'll see, especially for Halloween, you'll see it, but sometimes for like the Star Wars movies, or some of the other Harry Potter or whatever it is, people will come and they have their whole costume, get up, do all that stuff. That I had already said that about he in this book, Demolishing Detroit. And what I said to him, he's going and doing the training class, to operate the excavator, going to do the training class to remove the asbestos. And it's all these trainings and such with mostly non-white people. He said he even, had to have a serious talk like, man, am I taking a spot from someone in this training? And then after he verified that, that was not happening, said, okay, I'll go ahead and, go through the program. But I mean, I thought that way in. Once I had saw this happening a few times, I was thinking that white people do a lot of this, and that A word, authentic, to, learn what is this experience really like. You don't want to just go and watch somebody cook or ask a cook question. You want to go and put that apron on and get in the kitchen and cook. Now you know. I've heard that, and I mean, there is logic to that. But the problem is, hey, the worst book I've ever read, he says same thing. In fact, I got to be so authentic, I got to get me a nigger woman so I can be super authentic when I go to the interracial club. All of that, authentic research, ostensibly to learn and all of that, we still got this here problem. And even, I think Dr. Caverly, he said he did not write this book to solve a problem. Now, he said maybe people who read it will get a better grasp of what racism is, how it works. Maybe. The people who need that, I would say, are classified as non-white. I don't know. I guess Rayshawn got a copy. Right on, Brother Rayshawn. Brother Ken got a copy. Sister Daisy got a copy. Sister Maureen got a copy, but I don't know. They would have to see other victims of racism. Did they maybe they went to the library and got this here book? Did this help them understand white supremacy racism? I don't know. There are some helpful tidbits. He does use white supremacy in the book. There are definitely some helpful tidbits. The gender dynamic, I think, is certainly profound because it's so stark. Black male in Detroit, you might be hauling bricks might be the best you can do. Hauling bricks in December. He said it's so cold, Michigan wintertime. I went to Howell one time. Said, I'm coming up here no more. Man, and I will say for the record, I am a cold weather coward through and through. I don't walk in cold weather. I don't drive in cold weather. I don't sled in cold weather. Like nothing in cold weather. And I have never lived in like a Michigan, Alaska, New England, where you just, Canada, where it is just frigid, and it's you have to go out and shovel the driveway 3, 4, 10 times. I've never lived in an environment like that, and I still hate being cold. So, any hoodles, going out, you got to go out in Michigan cold, get bricks, or even doing the demolition, or getting asbestos. Anyway, I am glad Dr. Caverly, he told us that some of the black people that he was doing the training and talking to, some of them were suspicious, thankfully, and told him to beat it, get on out of here. But man, it did absolutely seem like, and from what he said, for whatever reason, people classified as white, they were a little less trusting of even talking to another white person once they found. You talking about what now? What? Again, can't be ignorant about racism, white supremacy, and have that sort of response. At minimum, it would just be a curiosity. Just, what are you talking about? I've never, you just sound so strange. What do you do? Maybe come over for dinner and explain it. You just sound so peculiar. I can't even wrap my mind around what you're saying. It wouldn't be I'm hostile, about your perspective. It would just be, what you're saying is bizarre. I've never heard anyone talk the way that you do before. Wow. I have to sit down and think about it. That's what I would, but that's not what he said. He said, you suspicious. White people cannot be ignorant about racism. And I really didn't hear any, read any evidence of ignorant white people in this book. What I read, the white people complaining about black people getting jobs. White people name calling black people. That's not white ignorance. All of that is so painfully familiar. That's what I expect from race soldiers. Matt, who's upset? Same thing I said yesterday. Who's upset about a child getting a quality education? Who's mad about that? Who's mad about someone getting a job? What does it mean to be? These are people who are upset about someone getting a job. We don't live in the same zip code. I'm still mad that you got employment. Mess up my day. I'm going to go and put something on IG about that right now. What does it mean to be classified as white? Any hoodles. I don't know, maybe we have anthropologists in the listening audience, maybe, or other researchers. I can only say a white man saying, for me, a white man saying, to do my research or book or, whatever project, it required me to go hang out with the Negro prisoners for X amount of time, days, weeks, whatever. What? Even in the name of authentic, that was when I did forget to say, he said he did all that for the authentic experience. It's not authentic because the people that he talked about, their authentic experience was rife with desperation. Like, to have an authentic experience, it would have to be there was some coercion, not I'm doing this on a voluntary basis just to be goofy for a day and to see what you niggers do. It would have to be coercion, like, look here, Nick, Dr. Caverly, look here, Nick, you're going to get in here and you're going to get all this installation and asbestos and you can get it off right now. And if you don't, you're not going to eat for the next 2 days. Now you got an authentic experience. Put a little desperation in you, and maybe even say, yeah, we're gonna be rushing you and all. Hurry up, chop, go fast, all that good stuff. Now, because it's not authentic if you go and you got your suit and everything, and we get ready to go get the asbestos, and all it takes is one nigger. They say, whoa, Nick, you don't go and do the asbestos. Now you got them pretty white lungs. You go sit down, get you a coffee, a bagel, a scone maybe. You sit down. We'll talk to you after it's over with. Ain't no thing. Let me get my broken respirator. Come on. That ain't no authentic experience. You didn't hear that about none of the convicts. They didn't get to the site and have somebody come up and say, whoa, Leroy, you don't go mess your lungs up. You go over there and sit down. You can't do this. It's too dangerous. You right. I was tripping. What was that? I'm going to go over here and sit down, man. I'm going to put these Newports in the trash, and I'm going to sit down and think of something constructive on my life. We didn't hear that. He said, I was the only white dude there from the group that's going to get the asbestos. The rest of these convict niggers. I think he said it might have had 1, 2 so-called non-white, non-black folks, but rather niggers. And they twist your arm, deliberate metaphor. Bend your elbow a little bit. You want to get out a little bit early, Leroy? Oh, now if you don't want to do it, hey, might have to stay a little longer. Prison violation or 2 might extend your stay. But don't worry about it if you don't want to get the asbestos. I mean, asbestos is dangerous, although sometimes they tell me prison can be dangerous too. But don't worry about it, Leroy. If you don't want to get the asbestos, don't even get the asbestos. That sort of thing where they come and pressure you, say, well, dang, maybe I guess I do want to get the come on. They don't arrest no white people in Chicago. None of the white people wanted them magical get out of jail free cards, courtesy of asbestos. None of the white people wanted that. What does it mean to be white? Let's see. Anything else to make sure? The white people not concealing. That too. This book, in my view, would be exponentially better if it was set in the white neighborhoods. He talks. That was one I forgot. It doesn't seem symmetrical, but he did explain the white people were less willing. They did not trust as much, and a lot of them didn't contact him back. Didn't seem to be the case for the black people. But this book should have centered with those white people. Go out to where they live. Ask them, why are you all even out here? You too good for Detroit? All of that, going through those questions, and then maybe we'll have a better understanding of what does it mean to be white. But yeah, I felt this book, it would have been way better, way more interesting, and revealed so much more, as opposed to going to talk to Rayshawn and all these folks who, what is it, Suburb Lungs, all that great, but man, let's get out. Look, go out there to where the white nationalists are. Go to some of their meetings. Go to a bunch of them, in fact. He was out there for years. Go to a year's worth of their meetings and see what they're talking about. What plan, what they plotting. What they think we need to be paying attention to. And then the hiring component of it as well. Go out and see what the white people in the training program, what are they talking about out and how? Are they a part of the white supremacists out yonder? The Nazis? Even that. White people can't be ignorant about racism if they know, oh, wait a minute. You going to do the training out in Howell, Michigan? That's the Nazi place, ain't it? Ooh, you better be careful. You're not even supposed to know. The Nazi camp is out there. Now what? And what's a Nazi? I'm ignorant about racism. What are you even talking about? That's not what he said. Any hoodles. We will be here on Thursday, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, neutralizing workplace racism. And then Friday, Catherine Massey Book Club, Session 5, Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles, his dissertation, Pan-African Sites of Resistance. We are back in the U.S. and Jamaica in the wings in terms of black book stores. But that's Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then Saturday, the Counter-Racist Weekly Review, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Daylight Savings Time. Struggling with it. Daylight Savings Time. That said, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. I mentioned Renisha McBride at the beginning. Folks can go back and see her murder and the conviction of the white killer. That's another one. Go in bed with Theodore Wafer's family. That's Renisha McBride's white killer. Suburbs of Detroit. Go in bed with them. What was his thought process? Why did he feel the need to shoot an unarmed black female teenager? That sort of white vigilante violence. I said Tim McVeigh, the Nichols brother. They got a long history of that. in the Michigan State area. But Renisha McBride, she ended up at Theodore Wafer's door where he blew her brains all over his yard because reportedly she had been drinking alcohol, got into some sort of vehicle collision, and went to his house trying to get medical attention after the accident. But seems like another one of those with Miss McBride, who was only 19 at the time. Sobriety would be best, especially if you're going to go out and do some driving. You might mess around and drive yourself into a racially restricted region. Now what? Renisha McBride, creator, remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us, stop name-calling people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.